we've covered some of the more positive points that you'll never hear about when people critique biblical slavery. Let's cover Mr. Wineisyourfriend's argument here. His argument is, quote, that you could brutally beat your slave within an inch of his life, and as long as he doesn't die within 3 days, you haven't done anything wrong. Well, I want to do two things here. I want to prove how this interpretation does not fit the context, and I'll give you the proper interpretation. Now, before we go any further, I want to read the verses, of course, that he was commenting on and gave that interpretation for. In the New American Standard, Exodus chapter 21, verses 20 and 21, if a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, he survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for he is his property. Now, the argument is here that, see, as long as he lives a day or two, hey, you can just beat him to death and he can die and who cares? I mean, God is supporting it, right? Well, that's not at all the case. In verse 12 of that same chapter, he says, he that strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. Verse 14, if, however, a man acts presumptuously towards his neighbor, and this is in contrast to a person who accidentally killed his neighbor, such I think he talks about like if an axe handle flies off and hits somebody and kills them, obviously that's an accident. In contrast to that, if a man acts presumptuously toward his neighbor so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar that he may die. Verse 16 of that same chapter says, he who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. And this is what the Bible calls man-stealing. If you were to steal a person and sell them into slavery, such as Joseph's brothers did, you were, under the law, to be put to death. So, in light of these statements, this verse 21 couldn't possibly be meaning what I believe Wineisyourfriend was suggesting, that the master had full reign to do whatever he wanted to, and as long as the slave didn't die, then he could go free. There's a more probable interpretation, and I've read this from several commentaries. The more probable interpretation that fits the context and the mood and the whole spirit of the law is the fact that most likely that it was an accident. The owner, yes, he did strike his slave, but he didn't mean to hit him that hard or whatever. Maybe he got angry. It happens. It happens to all of us. We've all, when we were kids, got in fights. We flew off the handle. Maybe we broke something we shouldn't have. We got mad. Accidents happen. Nobody's perfect. So the idea, and I've read this in the NET Study Bible Commentary and several other Bibles, this information is readily available, is the fact that it's not that he survives a day and then you go, oh, you can get away with murder, and God supports it. It's the fact that you probably didn't mean to, and the guy, it happened that he did die, but the owner didn't mean for him to die, okay? And that's the proper interpretation of that. Now, you also mentioned that I was saying that the ends justifies the means. No, it's just like divorce and polygamy in the law, okay? God was giving His people laws, but His people were supposed to witness to the other nations around them and be the voice of God on the earth. It's the way God set it up. And so He made the laws with a lot of these other things in mind. They knew there were going to be people, proselytes, people that became Jews, who perhaps had been divorced, who perhaps had polygamous relationships, or perhaps had slaves or been a slave. God was making rules not only for His people and the weaknesses of His people, but for the other cultures that might intermix and be involved. I mean, it's very obvious. Remember, when Jesus Christ, Matthew chapter 19, verse 8. In fact, let's read it. When the Pharisees or Sadducees, I forgot who, came to ask Him about divorce, He said to them, because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it has not been this way. So Jesus saying that God, yes, gave guidelines for something that was not the original intention for mankind. So we can see that He's also making an implicit statement here about polygamy, because from the beginning it was supposed to be one man and one woman, as we mentioned before, but yet He still gave guidelines for polygamy in the law. So it's not that the ends justifies the means, it's that we're sinners and we have hard hearts. And God made allowances for us to be able to function with other societies, etc., etc., etc. I believe I've kind of already talked about that. So my next point is, why not just abolish it? That was one point you made. Why not just get rid of slavery? Why didn't God just get rid of slavery in the law? Well, I ask you, why ask why? And the reason I say that, I'm not skipping the issue, but I could what if anything. When I've debated with Muslim friends of mine, they say, well, why did God go to all the trouble to put Jesus on the cross? Well, why is the sky blue? It is what it is. He did what he did. So I could what if anything, and I think the things I've honestly discussed to this point explain the answer. I think you can kind of get where I would already say there. But again, we cannot dwell on what if, because it is what it is. And the one thing you said was God should have known better. Well, my question is to you then, is better than what? Your standard? Well, your standard is your opinion. And Joe Blow next door to you has a standard in his opinion. He might think slavery is great, and you've got no right to oppress him with your opinion. Okay, so God should have known better. Better than what? And this is also assuming that all slavery is bad. It can be shown where slavery has been a very good thing for the Hebrew nation, because a brother could keep from dying. He could feed his family. So there's huge assumptions here that all slavery throughout history, and serfdom, which is basically, in my opinion, just a form of slavery, all of these things were bad. No, this is how certain countries function, how certain societies and cultures functioned. It is what it is. So God, because of the hardness of our hearts, we're to blame here. Made these allowances. So I'm under no delusion here that atheists that watch this video will agree with what I've said or even like what I've said, but I've tried to give an honest answer about biblical slavery and the specific thing that username Wineisyourfriend mentioned. Hope you enjoyed, and I'm going to get these other responses out hopefully very soon.